Hello, my name is Katherine Hall, and I'll be presenting the findings of my action research study looking at the effect of goal setting on academic achievement in reading comprehension. This study will briefly outline the important components seen here. First, the purpose of this study is to implement goal setting with reading comprehension skills and to then determine the effect that goal setting has on academic achievement. This study holds great significance in the field of education because goal setting is a lifelong skill that transcends the classroom and will be carried with learners throughout their lifetime. 3 research questions were explored in this study. The first looked at the effect that goal setting has on reading comprehension. Next, how student perceptions of goal setting differ. And finally, how goal setting preferences impact students' achievement. And several hypotheses were formed from the existing literature. One being that students who engage in goal setting are going to show more growth than students who do not. Students who set their own goals are going to have greater academic success than students who are given a teacher-set goal. And finally, that students' preferences towards goal setting are going to impact their level of achievement. Next, we'll briefly look at several elements of the literature review, starting with the theoretical and conceptual framework that was used. Deci and Ryan developed the self-determination theory, which states that intrinsic motivation develops in environments that encourage competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Much of the literature also refers to Locke and Latham's goal-setting theory, and this theory states that goals need to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. There were many findings from the relevant research, and I'll share just 2 now, one being that goal attainment is not always determined by the goal that's set, and another being that personal best goals can often be an effective form of motivation for students' achievement. However, there are still several areas where the literature needs to be advanced. Little research has been done to look at student-created goals versus teacher-created goals and the impact that they have. There's also been little research done with elementary participants in goal setting. And finally, little to no research has been done with English learners and goal setting. So this study aims to advance the literature in these 3 areas. Now, prior to starting this study, I upheld standards for ethical research through the city training. I also got the approval from the university and district, and consent and assent were obtained. The research design used was a mixed methods approach, using both a quasi-experimental design and explanatory design. Then participants were polled using convenience, non-probability sampling because the researcher was also the classroom teacher. So in the treatment classroom, there were 16 second grade students, the teacher researcher, and 75% of those students were active English learners. And then a control classroom was recruited with a cooperating teacher who shared cooperative planning with the teacher researcher. And there were 12 second grade students in this classroom, 60% of those students being active English learners. The independent variables being considered were the type of goal setting, students created or teacher created with a reading comprehension skill, and then the student's goal setting preference. The dependent variable being considered was students' reading comprehension achievement on a teacher-created assessment. Now, this study took place over the course of 4 weeks. After assent and consent were obtained, the study began with a pre-test over 3 different comprehension skills. Following this pre-test, the treatment classroom was split into 2 groups. The first treatment group was given a teacher-assigned goal based off their lowest score from the pre-test. And then the second treatment group was shown their scores from the pre-test and given the opportunity to create a goal for growth. Then following 2 weeks of that intervention, students took the midpoint test. And then after this mid-test, the treatment group swapped. So this time, treatment group 2 was given a teacher-assigned goal based off of their lowest score from the mid-test, and treatment group 1 was shown their scores from the mid-test and given the chance to create a goal for growth. Following that phase 2, those last 2 weeks of the study, a post-test was administered and student interviews were conducted. To collect the data, 3 different teacher-created assessments were used, and they were aligned with Tennessee state standards for reading. Each of those assessments assessed students on 3 different skills, one being identifying the main idea, the next looking at recalling facts and details, and the third being sequencing. Then students were interviewed and asked about their goal-setting preferences. To answer research question 1 and determine the effects of goal setting on academic achievement, descriptive statistics were used. And here you'll see phase 1 and phase 2 of the study showing the mean percentage scores for the pre-test, mid-test, and post-test. You'll notice that in phase 1, each of the 3 groups showed growth in their mean score from the pre to mid test. However, the growth from the control group was quite minimal. Then in phase 2, that pattern was repeated for both the treatment groups. However, the control group actually showed negative growth. Then a dependent t-test was used to compare the differences between the pre and mid test in phase 1 and mid and post test in phase 2 within each of the groups. And you'll notice that both treatment groups in phase 1 showed a difference that was statistically significant. Then an ANOVA was used to look for differences between the 3 groups. And you'll notice in phase 1, the differences between the groups were statistically significant. So then an independent t-test needed to be run to determine where those differences lie. And you'll see here that when comparing the growth of the control group to the growth of treatment group 1, those students who were receiving a teacher set goal, the difference between those was statistically significant. Next, to answer research question 2, students were asked about their goal setting preference. 9 students preferred student set goals and 7 students preferred teacher set goals. Then students were asked why they chose that preference, and several themes arose. The first being skill enjoyment. So students who reported that they chose that preference based on how much they enjoyed the skill they were practicing. Then choice. Students who just reported that they liked the opportunity to choose what they wanted to practice. And finally, teacher trust. Students who reported that they liked it when their teacher chose because they trusted them to choose what would be best for them to practice. Finally, to answer research question 3, those preferences were considered and to determine whether or not student preferences impacted their academic achievement. So a dependent t-test was used to compare students' growth in their matched preference and unmatched preference. And although the difference here was not statistically significant, there was a greater mean growth for students in their unmatched preference. So several results and findings from that data. First being that both treatment groups, those participating in teacher set goals and those participating in student set goals, showed statistically significant growth in phase 1, leading to the interpretation that goal setting in general is beneficial for achieving academic growth. Then after comparing the growth of each goal-setting intervention to the control, treatment group 1 who participated in teacher-set goals in phase 1 achieved growth that was statistically significant, implying that teacher-set goals were more effective and led to greater academic gains. The majority of students did prefer setting their own goals. However, student goal setting was not as effective as teacher goal setting. Based on the findings, one of the 3 hypotheses were supported, and that was that students who engage in goal setting are going to show more growth than students who do not. The data points to several areas that are connected to the literature that was reviewed. First being that goal attainment is not always determined by the goal that's set. So in this study, participants chose one reading comprehension skill as their growth goal, but most showed growth on the other 2 skills as well. The literature also points to the importance of young students needing concrete strategies when they're participating in goal setting. And I believe in this study, participants could have benefited more from receiving explicit instruction with how to set goals before creating their own student set goals. The findings from this study also connect with the assessment standard in the Tennessee Team rubric for evaluating teachers, which focuses on the importance of using assessments to drive future instruction. So I am using the results of this study to inform future instruction that I will be doing with goal setting in my classroom. There are several limitations that were recognized in this study, one being the length of the study. It was less than 4 weeks, so only 2 weeks for each intervention. The sample size was under 30 students. It happened during a pandemic, and students had actually just returned to in-person learning the week that this study began. Both classrooms had a large population of English learners who came with different background knowledges and different levels of English proficiency. And the assessments, although aligned with Tennessee state standards, they were teacher created and had several different text genres on them. Recommendations and conclusions. Teachers should routinely implement goal setting in their classrooms. Teachers should also explicitly teach goal-setting skills to elementary students. And teachers need to be trained on the importance of goal setting in connection with data collection and academic achievement with students. Thank you so much for your time.